Beijing, April 1644. It was really the end for him. Chongzhong Huangdi was in his imperial garden for what will be the final time. The Manchus have invaded the kingdom, and peasant rebels were outside the capital. They would kill him if he tried to escape. He walks up a hill, finds a tree, looks out at his kingdom one last time, and hangs himself. His eunuchs do the same. In his final note, he wrote, "I'll die unable to face my ancestors in the underworld, dejected and ashamed. May the rebels dismember my corpse and slaughter my officials. But let them not despoil the imperial tombs, nor harm a single one of our people." Chongzhong Huangdi would be the last emperor of the Ming dynasty. It had been less than 300 years since Hongwu Huangdi rose up against the Khans, but that meant nothing now. The Ming would never rule China again. The Han people will never rule all of China ever again. And China was given one last dynasty. 200 years later, everyone wanted a piece of the Middle Kingdom. The Qing had lost their city of Canton to the British and the French. Russia and the United States also contributed, sending supplies into Hong Kong. And if you're wondering why the US and Russia decided to join the war despite hating the UK, the answer is this. So America attacked some river forts near Canton in 1856, and Russia got parts of Manchuria in 1858. Later that May, Seymour wanted to make peace with the Chinese by seizing the Taku fort near Tianjin, forcing the Chinese imperial powers to begin negotiations, eventually leading to the Treaty of Tianjin. However, because they were part of the war, technically, the United States and Russian Empire sat with the UK and France in the Treaty of Tianjin in June. The treaty stated, 1. The imperial powers could establish diplomatic legations in Beijing. 2. 10 more ports would be open to foreign trade, adding on to the original 5. 3. Foreign ships are allowed to travel through the Yangtze freely. 4. Foreigners can travel into inner China. 5. China must pay $100 million to the UK and $50 million to France. One of the most important parts of the treaty, however, was that the Chinese had to legalize the import of opium. This is still the OPIUM Wars, above everything else. Unsurprisingly, the Chinese refused to ratify the treaty. And so, war continued. After that whole event, the British thought of a way they could force the ratification of the treaty. In the First Opium War, the British tried to take Nanjing. This time, however, they'll take the capital, Beijing. During peace talks, the British returned the Taku forts to the Chinese. After the Chinese refused to ratify the treaty, the emperor assigned General San Zhishen to guard the Taku forts, alongside 4,000 Mongol troops. In June of 1859, a British naval force under Admiral Sir John Hope with Anglo-French envoys arrived near the Taku forts. They asked if they could pass through to Beijing. Zhishen replied that the envoys could land near the Beitang port and walk to Beijing, but he wouldn't allow armed soldiers to accompany them. The British insisted that they land here and then head to Beijing with troops. You see, the Taku forts blocked the way of the Hai River, which, if you know river maps of China well enough, you could get to the capital. So on June 25th, 1859, the British force shelled the forts. However, low tide prevented the landing. The British had to retreat, and the Chinese had won. But nothing stops the British forever, because in the summer of 1860, the British attacked the Taku forts for the third time. With a force of 11,000 soldiers, 5 times more than last time, as well as 6,700 French troops, they captured Yantai, Dalian, and on the 21st of August, 1860, began their attack on the Taku forts. They would take Tianjin 2 days later, and it wouldn't be long for them to get to Beijing. Xianfeng Huangdi dispatched ministers for peace talks, but when a British envoy, Henry Parkes, insulted the imperial emissary, and the British kidnapped the prefect of Tianjin, Parks and the people who went with him were arrested in the following month. Half of them will be killed. The British would remember this. Later, Rishen and his 10,000 Mongol cavalry and 20,000 infantry soldiers were defeated at Zhangjiawan, thanks to... And now the British and French had set their sights for the capital, entering Beijing on the 6th of October. By this point, the emperor had left for Jahal, or Ruhe, where it all began, leaving Prince Gong to deal with what was about to come. In Beijing, there was a summer palace called Yuanmingyuan, only a few miles away from the Forbidden City. What would eventually be known as the Versailles of the East, Yuanmingyuan was a sight to behold. It was divided into 3 gardens, covered by nearly 1,000 acres, and had Chinese temples, halls, pavilions, and memorabilia dating back as far as the Han Dynasty, or 2,000 years ago. And as revenge for Parks' imprisonment, Yuanmingyuan would be burned and looted. By the next few weeks, everything would be gone. Meanwhile, Prince Gong was negotiating with the imperial powers. The agreement was this. Along with the previous agreements, some additional agreements include how Tianjin would become a port, the UK would get Kowloon, Britain and France would get $240 million, and of course, opium would be legal. The treaty would be signed and ratified, and the Second Opium War would come to an end. Yuanmingyuan would continue to burn for 3 days. It would be looted by soldiers and common folk. In the end, little remained of the old palace, resembling ruins you would see in Athens or Rome. Hong Kong would continue to expand its territory until 1898, when it was given a 99-year timer before it had to be returned to China. Opium was legal in the country until 1949, when Mao Zedong banned it once again. And once the Opium Wars came to a close, most of the Anglo-Chinese conflict had came to a close. But still, China would go through another 89 years of humiliation. But we'll get to those another time.